For the longest time, I've argued that live elo is not the best way to rank every Grandmaster. There are so many ways to farm elo, you can peaks it, and sometimes stronger players just don't care to preserve their rating as much as others. So in today's video, we'll be setting the rankings in stone and making my 2026 Super Grandmaster tier list. At the end of the video, we'll compare the tier list rankings to their live rankings to see how different they might be. If you guys think any of my rankings are wrong, feel free to leave a comment saying where you would put them instead. But for now, let's get into the tier list. So first, we can start off with Alireza Firouzja. Now Firouzja obviously didn't have a great Sinkfield Cup. He finished on 3.5 points, losing to Fabiano Caruana, Prague, and Nodirbek, and only winning once against Duda. He had a great Grand Swiss though, finishing on 7.5 points and could have gone to the candidates. He had wins against Sam Shankland, Nodirbek Yakiboev, and Nihal Sarin, and even drew to players like Anish, Hans, and Bluebaum, so he had very tough pairings. He also had a decent London Chess Classic on 5.5 points, but it was against a relatively easy field. I think it's very clear that Alireza just isn't locked in. He's an extremely talented player, but he doesn't really care about chess as much as he once did. So based on his performances in the last 12 months, I think he belongs in the B tier. Now for the next one, Yagiz, Kaan, Erdogmus, we're going to put him in the S tier. I just feel a little bit weird critiquing a 14-year-old kid. This guy is way too young to be criticizing, and he's doing very well for his age. He even beat someone like MVL in the Clash of Generations, which was a really good win, not to mention he's had other good tournaments as well. But I feel like I can't put him in a lower tier. He's 14 years old, so he goes into the S tier. This next Grandmaster though is one that you may have not heard of before because it's the sponsor of today's video, ChessMind.ai. ChessMind has had a great last 12 months and might even make the candidates next year, so of course they go in the S tier.
Most courses obsess over memorizing hundreds of opening lines, but ChessMind is built around something different, understanding positions and not just remembering moves. The goal isn't just to know theory, it's to know what to do when theory runs out. That's why the courses on ChessMind only take around an hour to complete, because the priority isn't on memorization, it's positional understanding. For just $7 per month, you can unlock over 50 courses on ChessMind, plus access to their AI coach, personalized puzzles, and training videos hosted by Chilean Grandmaster Maurizio Flores. And with the link in the description, you guys can get 20% off your purchase too.
Vladimir Fedoseev is one of those players that I kind of feel gets invited to tournaments to make up numbers. He's always got a good rating, and he's always a Super Grandmaster, always above 2,700 ELO, if not close to it, but you never really see him do anything. He actually had a really good Tata Steel 2026, he only lost to Hans Niemann and Gukesh, and he had wins against Arjun Anigaisi, Vincent Keymer, and Aravindh. There's not much else to go on, but he hasn't had a bad year, so I feel like we can put him in the C tier. Magnus Carlsen obviously goes in the S tier, need I say more? I know he hasn't played so much recently, but I don't think it matters. It's Magnus Carlsen, he's obviously in the S tier. The next player is Vincent Keymer. Keymer had a pretty average Prague Masters, scoring just 4 points with no significant wins. He also had an average World Cup, knocked out in the third round by eventual third place Sesepenko. He had a great European Teams Championship and a great European Club Cup, and a fantastic Grand Swiss on 7.5 points, missing out on candidates by tiebreaks. He also had a fantastic Chennai Grand Masters, finishing on 7 points without losing a single game. His rating backs this one up as well, and I feel like nobody will have any disagreements that Vincent Keymer belongs in the A tier. Now we have the player that has to take on Yagiz Sindarov at the next World Chess Championship, Gukesh Dommaraju. Gukesh had a forgettable Prague Masters, finishing on just 3.5 points. He had an average Tata Steel, finishing on 6.5 with no real statement wins, but held some nice draws. He had a poor World Cup, losing in the second round to Frederick Svein. He had a great European Club Cup, beating Erdogmus and drawing Anish. He had an average Grand Swiss on 6 points, losing to 2600, so a little bit forgettable there, and he also had a very forgettable Sinkfield Cup, finishing on 4 points, but one win against Nodirbek, who had a really bad tournament. He had a respectable Norway chess, beating Magnus, Arjun, Wei Yi, and Hikaru, but that was a little while ago, and then he also had an average Superbet Classic in Romania, only beating Levon and finishing on 4 points. In the most recent World Chess Championship between Ding Liren and Gukesh, a lot of people thought that it would be a complete walk in the park for Gukesh. Even when people thought it was going to be such a walk in the park, I really thought that Ding was going to give it his all and make it a really close game. And it was. But now the kind of tables have turned where I think going into this World Chess Championship, Yagiz Sindarov is going to be the favorite. I think Gukesh has been playing too poorly for too long, and it's going to be so impossibly difficult for him to turn it around against a player like Yagiz Sindarov. And I think his recent performances are a reflection of that, and I think he has to go into the C tier. The next Grandmaster is Amin Tabatabaei, whose name I hope I'm pronouncing right. I've seen a lot of Amin's games and his performances in several tournaments, and he has never really impressed me. He had an unconvincing Asian Men's Championship, he had a decent performance at the Karpov International, a decent 2025 Grand Swiss, but no real statement wins. But with all that being said, I feel like he hasn't really had a chance within the last 12 months to actually play anyone above him in this list. Maybe that's for good reason, considering he hasn't taken the chances that he has had, but I feel like there's no way I can put him any higher than the D tier in this video. We've got Jan-Krzysztof Duda next, who hasn't really played enough chess to properly be in this tier list, so we're going to put him at the bottom of the D tier, not because he's bad, but because he hasn't played anywhere near enough for us to really know how good he is. Next we have Hikaru Nakamura. Followed by Hikaru, we have Liren, who obviously hasn't played enough chess, and we've also got Dmitry Andreikin, who hasn't played enough chess either. But the next player has played enough chess, and his name is Aravindh Chithambaram. Hopefully I'm saying that name right as well, but he's had a mixed bag of performances in the last 12 months. I thought he had a great Prague Masters, beating players like Hans, Gukesh, Van Forest, and Navarra, finishing on 5 points. He had a forgettable Tata Steel, clinching for draws mostly, and an awful World Cup, knocked out in the first round in Classical. He had an average Akiba Rubinstein tournament on 4.5 points, and got absolutely smoked at the Chess Masters. What's funny about Aravindh is, for some reason I thought he was like 16, but he's like 26, so he's not even really a young player anymore, and I think he might be down the bottom of this list as well. Next up though, we've got Hans Niemann, who I think has had a great last 12 months. He had an average Prague Masters, losing to Chithambaram, Van Forest, and only scoring 4 points, but then he had a solid Tata Steel Masters, only losing to Keymer with solid draws against top GMs. He had a really bad 2025 World Cup, losing in the first round against Ledici, and an average US Championship, finishing on 5.5 points. Although I think he had a really good 2025 Grand Swiss, finishing on 7 points and beating Prague. Had he not lost to Giri in the final round, he would have won the tournament outright. I think Hans is doing great. I think he's a player that's good across every format as well, which is kind of rare to see in a player, but I think he's doing really well. I think he is improving as well. I feel like you see players at Hans's age and they kind of stagnate and they never get better. I think Hans is improving as the years go by, and I feel like he belongs comfortably in the B tier. Anish Giri is next, and he's also a player that I did a deep dive on in my 2026 candidates video, so if you want to see all of his tournament history, you can go find that video. I don't want to bore the people that have already watched that video, but he's going to go in the A tier. He also had a fantastic candidates, which I did predict. I thought he was going to win it, but Yagiz Sindarov did win it. Anish got 8.5 in the candidates, I believe, so he's had a really good tournament. He's also had a really good past 12 months. He had a little bit of poor form in the 2 months leading up to the candidates, but I feel like when you've got candidates around the corner, you're probably not going to play your best chess leading up to it because you're saving all of your preparation for the biggest tournament possibly of your career. But anyway, I feel like A tier is more than acceptable. Next we've got Anand, who is another player that's going to go in the bottom tier because they don't play enough chess. And next we've got Fabiano Caruana, who goes in the A tier, which is another player that I mentioned in that candidates video, which will be at the top of the description. He had a kind of underwhelming candidates performance. I think even by his standards, he would admit that, but I don't think it takes away from the great player that he is. By the way, this is not in order. Yagiz Kaan Erdogmus is not the greatest chess player of all time. These tiers are not in order, it's just kind of random. But next up, we have everyone's favorite Grandmaster, Levon Aronian. He had an uneventful 2025 World Cup, knocked out by Arjun Erdogmus. He had a very solid 2025 US Championship and was basically unbreakable in that tournament. He had a solid Grand Chess Tour final, he had a forgettable 2025 Grand Swiss, losing to Woodward and Donchenko, scoring just 5 points. But he also had a solid Sinkfield Cup, winning once against Nodirbek and drawing the rest. Not to mention, he had a solid Superbet Chess Classic in Romania and made good draws against a strong field. He is also 43 years old, so he is well and truly Unk status. I don't think he's going to get back to his best ever. I think he's just past it, you know. I feel like in chess, once you reach a certain age, unless you are absolutely locked in, you're just going to see your rating slowly decline. I think he's going to be a top Grandmaster, a Super Grandmaster for a little while longer, but I think, you know, 5-10 years time, I don't think we're going to really be hearing about Levon. With all that being said, he's still a great chess player, and I think he belongs in the B tier. Next up though, we've got my personal favorite grandmaster, Richard Rapport. Rapport had a pretty poor 2025 World Cup, being knocked out by Sam Shankland, but he had a solid European team championship and a great FIDE Grand Swiss, but arguably had lucky pairing. He also had a solid UZ Chess Masters, only losing to Sindarov and Nodirbek. I think he's also taken a little bit of a step back from chess. He was also dinged second for that World Chess Championship match, but regardless, I think everyone is very aware of how good of a chess player Richard Rapport is, and I think he also gets into the B tier. Next up, we've got Vidit Gujrathi. Vidit had a poor World Cup, knocked out in the second round by Sam Shankland. He had a good Grand Swiss, and if he beat Mishra Abhimanyu in the final round, he could have qualified for the candidates. He hasn't played too many tournaments. He had a forgettable Chennai Grandmasters, only beating Sarin and picking up some draws, and that's it. He's also lost an incredible amount of rating, and even if you just look at the ELO rankings, he's going to be at the bottom of this pile anyway. So based on the fact that he hasn't had many good tournaments and his ELO is already on the lower side, he is going to go into the D tier. Next up though is what might be my current favorite grandmaster in chess, Nodirbek Abdusattorov. This guy is a serial winner. He won the Prague Masters, Tata Steel 2026, the London Chess Classic, and he finished third place in the UZ Chess Masters and Sharjah Masters. He had a poor World Cup, losing to Martinez in the second round, but he also had a good Grand Swiss, finishing on 7 points and undefeated, but then had a forgettable Sinkfield Cup, which we mentioned earlier in the video, on 2.5 points. Winning 3 chess tournaments and finishing third in 2 others in the last 12 months is absolutely unreal. Not to mention, his ELO is already on the higher end. I think he's like 4th highest rated in the world right now. He certainly belongs in the S tier. Next up, we have Prague, who has had really mixed results over the last 12 months. Prague had a pretty forgettable Tata Steel, only beating Chithambaram and finishing on 5.5 points. He had a good London Chess Classic, but it was the Open, so a significantly weaker field, and he had a decent World Cup, losing to Dubov in the tiebreaks in the third round, who is a respectable player to lose against, especially in the tiebreaks. He had an average Grand Chess Tour finals and an average Grand Swiss, finishing on 6 points with no great wins. He had a good Sinkfield Cup, finishing on 5.5 points, beating Gukesh and Firouzja and drawing everyone else. A decent UZ Chess Masters, finishing on 5.5 points again, with some worrying losses though, and a decent Superbet Chess Classic in Romania on 5.5 points again. He went undefeated whilst also beating Wesley So and Nodirbek Abdusattorov. He had a pretty underwhelming candidates, and I've been saying this for a while. If the candidates came 6 months sooner, I think he would have had a red hot chance of winning it as well. So I don't think this takes away too much from his overall ranking, and he should go into the B tier as well. Next, we've got Jan Nepomniachtchi, who might have had the biggest fall from grace out of anyone on this list. He had a fantastic Aeroflot Open, but the competition was not too good, and he drew the only 2600 plus rated player he faced. He had a decent 2025 Grand Swiss on 6 points, but he lost to Andreas Benker in the final round. He also had a poor UZ Chess Masters, losing to Sindarov and Shams Sidin, drawing the rest. I've never even heard of that Grandmaster before, so my editor will put him on screen now. But yeah, not only has Napo lost all of his rating, putting him at the bottom of the pile anyway, he also hasn't had many good tournaments, so I feel like he belongs in the D tier. Next up, we've got Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, who used to be one of my favorite chess players, only because he wore hoodies to his chess games. He hasn't really been in the best of form. He had an unconvincing Azerbaijani men's championship, a poor World Cup, knocked out by Nils Grandelius in the second round. He had a decent European team championship, a good 40th European Club Cup, and a decent FIDE Grand Swiss, but no real statement wins. I feel like that selection of tournaments isn't good enough to boost what is already a rating that is at the bottom of these players anyway, so he will also go into the D tier. Next up, we've got Iranian Grandmaster Parham Maghsoodloo. Parham had a great showing at the Prague Masters, beating Van Foreest, Keymer, and holding strong draws. He had an okay FIDE World Cup and lost to the eventual runner-up Wei Yi. He had great performances at the European Club Cup, but a shaky 2025 Grand Swiss, with big wins against Firouzja and Rapport, but his tournament fell apart in the back end. He had a decent UZ Chess Cup, winning against Prague and drawing to players like Sindarov and Erigaisi, but poor performances in the Sharjah Masters, nothing really noteworthy. Despite not having the highest rating or the best catalogue of tournaments, I feel like Parham's ability to beat all of these Super Grandmasters on any given day is what puts him into the C tier as opposed to anything below. Next up, we've got Wei Yi, who is another player that I mentioned in that candidates tier list video. You guys can go back and watch it, and he goes into the A tier. I actually wasn't a believer in Wei Yi. I put him in the C tier in my candidates tier list video because I didn't think he was going to perform form based on how little chess he's played in the past 12 months, but he had a great candidates in 2026, and what impressed me the most was his really good preparation. I think he's one of those players that can just lock in at any given moment. If he really wants to have a good tournament, he will, and he showed that he could do that. Next up, we have Vladimir Dominguez Perez, who also goes into the D tier because he hasn't played enough chess in the last 12 months, which means Nihal Sarin is the next grandmaster to look at. Nihal hasn't played too many major tournaments in the last 12 months. He had a decent European Club Cup and a very solid FIDE Grand Swiss, finishing on 7 points. He also had an okay Chennai Grand Masters, beating Aryan Erdogmus most notably, but nothing else. That's kind of it in the last 12 months for Nihal Sarin. I feel like combined with his rating and his recent performances, I can't really put him above the C tier either. Next we've got Liem Quang, who hasn't played enough chess in the last 12 months, so will also go in the D tier. But after him we have Wesley So, who is one of my favorite chess players, and I feel like he's a chess player that has absolutely zero haters. Wesley So had a great 2025 US Championship, didn't lose a single game, and finished on 7.5 points. He also had a great Sinkfield Cup. Again, he didn't lose a game against a tough field and picked up wins versus Nodirbek and Gukesh. He also played in the Superbet Chess Classic in Romania and played okay, losing to MVL in Prague, but overall it wasn't a bad tournament. Wesley So has held on to a pretty good rating, and he's got a decent catalogue of tournaments in the last 12 months as well, and I feel like it would be weird to put him lower than the A tier considering his pedigree. Next up we've got Yagiz Sindarov. I feel like it's impossible not to put him at S tier after that candidate's performance. I did a deep dive into his previous chess tournaments in that video that I mentioned as well, so if you want to go check that out, you can. But yeah, I feel like Sindarov being in the S tier makes a lot of sense. This next one might surprise a lot of people, but our next grandmaster is Jordan van Foreest. Jordan played decent in the Prague Masters, beating Keymer, Gukesh, Hans, and Yakiboev, but only finished on 5 points. He had an amazing Tata Steel, finishing on 7.5, with only one loss against Erdogmus. He beat Giri and Keymer most notably, with strong draws too. He had a poor World Cup, he was knocked out in the second round by Sarana, but had a solid European Team Championship and an equally solid European Club Cup. He had an average Grand Swiss on 6.5, but very tough pairings. He lost to Anish, beat Mamedyarov, and drew to Sindarov. He had a poor Chennai Grand Masters, finishing on just 4 points, and he was also the Dutch chess champion in 2025. It just seems to me like Jordan decided, I'm gonna lock in, and over the past 6 months he's just played really well and much better than his rating would suggest he is. I'm gonna put him into the A tier. I know that might be an unpopular opinion, but he's just been so good lately and I can't ignore that. Next up, we have Yu Yangyi. Yu was okay in the FIDE World Cup, losing to the eventual winner, so it's difficult to say. He was essentially untouchable in Chinese chess tournaments and had a decent European Club Cup and a good FIDE Grand Swiss despite no statement wins. He didn't play much chess outside of that, so it's really difficult to say where he lies in this tier list, so I thought I would put him in the C tier, just where his rating suggests he should be. And finally, the last player in this tier list, we have Arjun Erdogmus. Arjun had a poor Tata Steel, losing to Fedoseev, Erdogmus, Sindarov, and Nodirbek, only winning against Prague. He had a solid World Cup, only losing to the eventual runner-up Wei Yi, and he had a great Grand Swiss, only losing to the eventual runner-up Matthias Bluebaum and finishing on 7. He had an okay Chennai Grand Masters, only losing to Nihal Sarin, and even an okay Norway chess against a tough field. He had a relatively okay US Chess Masters as well. I really like Arjun, especially because he plays so much chess. I would assume that the more chess that you play, the more difficult it is to get good performances in all of those tournaments across the board. So he definitely does a really good job, and I feel like he belongs in the B tier. So that is our tier list completed, and now it's time to compare this tier list with where they're actually ranked by ELO. So here you can see the live rankings of all of the players based on ELO compared to my tier list. Everyone highlighted in blue was in the S tier, green, A tier, and so on and so forth. You can see they line up pretty well, but there are a couple of differences between my rankings and the live ELOs. I think this difference exists because of how slow chess ratings can change over time. Because of how many games are just drawn in chess, it takes a long time for a player to go down or up in ELO. Yagiz Sindarov, for example, is easily the most in-form player right now, but he's only here in the world rankings. Even after one of the best candidates tournaments you'll ever see, it still takes a long time to actually gain that rating because of how many draws you're bound to get. Not to mention that some players also just sit on their ELOs and don't play chess. I feel like live rating isn't a great representation of how strong players are. I think it's a good representation, don't get me wrong, but I think also just watching tournaments and seeing results is an even better one. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video and today's tier list. Let me know if you guys disagree with anything in the comments below or where you would put players in this tier list. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one.